The stream is live. So it's not working. You should switch it on. Yeah. Yes, don't break yourself.
One or two. Thank you.
So we have to speak in this mic?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. You're already live? Yes. Hello everyone, and welcome to the session titled Climate Anxiety to Action, Youth Response to Climate Misinformation. I am Dr. Anurag Deep from UNESCO MGIP. I am the project officer there, and I handle online courses around education for sustainable development and media literacy. With us, we have Palini, who is currently studying environment management and has gained extensive experience through her involvement in organizations such as Greenpeace Africa, Greenpop, Slow Food, and Gandhi Development Trust. We also have Antonio, who is a committed young climate advocate engaged with international youth organizations, including SDSN Youth, where he serves the global events and partnerships. You are part of UNESCO Climate Action Network UK. We have Al Hassan Omar, the young climate advocate, and Kalonji from Youth for Ecocide Africa. So welcome everyone, and thank you for joining. So to give you a brief background, this session will have two major parts. One is the document which we came up, the pointer of actions, which Palini will be talking about. And the second part is the role of misinformation and disinformation in climate action. So I will start with the first part, the document, where Palini will talk about a brief background of the initiative and what was done behind this, and what are the major key takeaways from this document. So over to you, Palini.
Greetings and thank you, Anurag, for that warm introduction. And as he said, yes, I'm an environmental management student and I work with esteemed organizations. And today I'm talking on behalf of UNESCO and GIP. I was recently a youth panelist at the Y20 pre-summit in Brazil that occurred in June 2024. I was one of 6 other youths that were there. These are their names: Abhishek from India, Ana Monero from Spain, Ana Opre from Romania, Christy Zacarias from Indonesia, and Yuan from Argentina, and of course myself, number 6. I was one of the 6 youth that were talking on climate anxiety and how it can be tackled through social emotional learning at the TAGI event at the Y20 pre-summit. And after that event, we compiled a pointers of action document over there. There's the heading of what I just mentioned, tackling climate change anxiety through social emotional learning. And Yeah, so how we came about it was from that discussion that we had. We talked about how it affects youth, our mental and health well-being, and we discussed climate change impacts that we can do using social emotional learning and using the cognitive teachings from the SEL that we went through. And yeah, these are the topics that we mentioned in the pointers of action. Um, the impact of climate change, of course, that's why we're all here, and understanding climate anxiety, the anxiety that many of us youth present here as well, volunteers, delegations, observers, everyone who experience climate anxiety and how it affects our actions on the ground. We spoke about that on the Pointers of Action document. And we also elaborated further on social emotional learning, which is also elaborated further on the UNESCO MGIEP website, and how it relates to climate anxiety and how we can better our actions using social emotional learning. And as I mentioned, your cognitive perspective, the way we think can change the way we act. And if once we acknowledge that we have climate anxiety, we can focus on bettering our actions, and our actions have a better success rate once we have developed our minds with social emotional learning and not facing the gloom and doom with just difficult climate anxiety and an unhealthy mental and physical well-being. So once you practice it, it will be way better. And the role of education institutions, this is an important topic that we elaborated on in the Pointers of Action document. How educations need to start incorporating climate change anxiety in their topics and their learnings starting from a very young age. It's important that students learn in their educational institutions having access to psychological help of their physical and mental well-being, as it is a very important topic that many just disregard. Myself, I did not take care of my mental health, and I prefer that my educational institution has this as an opportunity. And I'm very grateful that UNESCO MGIP, under their TAG-E program, they are influencing this in institutions across the world. And I cannot wait for it to be impacted the youth across the world, not just my country, South Africa. And yeah, recommendations for action. This is towards the end of our document. And I can name a few, but if you want to see the rest, you can always go back to it. And yeah, the recommendations were funding youth-led actions. And another one was digital hubs for youth to connect with each other from around the world and discuss the climate change anxiety that they face, and discuss their problems and work together for solutions. And of course, sourcing the UNESCO MGIEP site for social emotional learning is one of the recommendations. Yeah. Okay. Okay, for sure. The key takeaways from the document. There we go. Okay, climate anxiety solutions through psychology. Yeah, we provided a few solutions for climate change anxiety. Is practicing a sustainable lifestyle is one of them, and embrace slow living, etc. But also SEL is a great part, and incorporating it in your studies. And SEL integration in climate activism, you must try to link it with your actions, environmental actions, as I mentioned, for a better success rate. And mental health initiatives in education, I have mentioned that already. Mindfulness and self-reflection practices. This one is very important for students and teachers, adults, children. It's very important to better our inner self, our inner beings, and we should ask the questions like, who do I want to be? What kind of story do you want to set for yourself in the future? We should ask this question and implement our actions and see how we are better as inner beings, and focus on that. And utilize UNESCO MGIEP's website for the SEL. I mentioned this like 3 times already, so I'm sure go to the website. That's my key takeaway from the Pointers of Action.
Would you like to add anything on the anxiety
part? Yes, that is actually the one of important point to mention in climate issues, anxiety, especially when we are in the African sites, that point is very, very deep because they are facing what they don't know. They are victim of climate change impact, but they are thinking that it's caused by witchcraft, for example. Some of them think that is someone else in a certain village who is causing floods. Then not only that they are in a condition of anxiety, but they don't know what they are facing. So it's leading them to so many other problems, mental health problems, and that's why in my next intervention, I will talk about the importance of climate education, what I'm doing in my communities.
I will touch base a little bit later on how to fight this, but I think eco anxiety is one of the main problems of our generation. But the fact that we don't name it, it's definitely generating a more broader problem because we're not able to fight against it, or also to have open conversations about how we encounter it. So I remember the first time that I faced it, I was thinking of like, what is the point of everything that I'm doing, and other catastrophic ideas. And when I start speaking with my friends who are, in this environment, I realize, I'm not alone. So I think that is one of the first things when you speak with people about how do you feel about the current climate situation. It's very important to find that group of people that where you can be open about it, because eco anxiety is one of the main problems, of our generation. Even there's studies of like children facing eco anxiety. So this is a problem that is not going to go away. So we need to find solutions to tackle it, but also to find how we can use that energy to other aspects that can help us combat climate change.
I think definitely like eco anxiety is very real. And as you said, I actually really liked your point that there's a lot of misinformation and it heavily contributes to the mental health effects of climate change. So for example, I experienced really big floods in May where I live. And it was really bad. I was stuck actually for 15 hours with water this high with a lot of other people. But I kind of was at peace with it because I understood the reason for it. However, a lot of my family members or friends thought this was God punishing them for something that they did, which is not true, right? And when you think like that, you end up beating yourself up even though you're going through a traumatic experience. That's one. Two, the other effect is that you don't actually end up pointing fingers at the right cause. So you don't think of the companies that are ruining the environment. You don't think of climate change. You don't think of the politicians you're electing. So I definitely agree with you. I think that point should definitely be addressed sooner rather than later.
If that's the key takeaway from the document, so have you considered the modern landscape? And by modern landscape, we mean the digital world. Okay. So what's your thought on that, Antonio?
So I think as of now, we need to be very conscious about the world we're living. We're interconnected, not only our societies, but also the information that we are consuming. And as of now, we're first going to talk about a little bit of the data. Around 65% of the global population is now using the internet today. 60% of them are social media users who are connected to each other across geographical regions. And there is a lot of information that is getting, out there. But one of the main problems is that has become a very huge challenge to back up information, to revise where the data is coming from. And this is spreading the misinformation and disinformation, especially related to topics on climate change. And this has been used, also for very like malinformation uses, such as political and economic interest. And overall, and I really like what you mentioned about the importance of eco anxiety, because actually social media and all the information we are receiving are contributing to this constant feeling we have, because we are all day bombarded with news, with posts about how difficult and awful the situation is right now, which is true, unfortunately. But the fact that we are consuming this information, it's only making this feeling worse for the society and especially for the younger generations. So we also need to be very cautious about the information we're consuming, how often we're doing it, and the type of messages, we are consuming as well. Because the fact that everything we read is catastrophic is not going to help us to actually find the solutions towards it. So the why and the how we are consuming information is something we definitely need to be more cautious about. So now talking about the current media landscape, we first have the shift from traditional to social media, especially from the younger generations. We're not buying newspapers, ahead. We're like reading online. A lot of the information actually comes from other social media outlets, especially TikTok, YouTube. We have the echo chambers and misinformation, which, as I mentioned, are already generating a lot of problems, especially at the political and economic levels. The digital engagement and online reads that we have, especially because when you are consuming this type of information, the same algorithms will show you more information like that. So if you start consuming this information, it's very likely you will be connected to people who will think the same way. So it gets really difficult to break the cycles because they help you and they encourage you to think about it this way. And finally, the media literacy and responsible consumption, which is one topic that we are hardly ever taught, even in our social spaces, but especially in formal education, nobody actually taught us how to read information, what kind of information should we do, should we read. So some of the very just strategies for debunking climate misinformation. The first one is verify the sources. It's very important, like every image that we consume, we need to verify where it comes from, who wrote the article, who are the authors, where they were, just to have the clear full picture of what is the intention of the information we're reading. The second one is to cross-check the facts. It's always helpful to find the same fact or data point from multiple reliable sources. If you find something in a sort of sketchy outlet, be very cautious. If you see an image on Instagram, please verify it and don't just repost it because that might be a wrong point misinformation as well. Examine the evidence, right now, especially with AI, it's getting way more difficult to see what is true and what is not, or it's way more difficult to spot what is actually happening. They were mentioning about some of the disasters they are facing. And if someone takes, by instance, some footage and put it on social media and say this is happening in another part of the world because of X, Y, Z, that can actually also generate this information around the world, and that is already happening. Be aware of the bias. Everyone, we all have our bias, so it's very important that when we read information, we try to be as neutral as possible. And if the author is also having a position, we need to make sure that we're not, sort of encouraging those biases that we already have. Consult experts. You have people, or if you're in networks that know about these topics in a more expertise way, reach out to them so you can have another point of view, but especially for someone who knows actually about these topics. And finally, report misinformation. Right now, there are ways in which social media you can report all this misinformation. For instance, we saw during the pandemic, there was like this legend of like this, this is coming from an outlet. Please verify the information as well. And I think little by little, people are getting more cautious about the information we share, just because we know the implications it might have. But it has become so easy. That's the main problem. You can just share, reshare, and especially for people who have a very big audience, it's very delicate what you're sharing out there, because that might influence the choices of other people as well.
I think I would like to know your perspective that what's happening in Africa, and from also the technology perspective and the recent AI development, and especially in the context of climate change.
Yes, according to the climate information in my continent, Africa, but especially in Congo, first of all, we need to know that it is a continent which is the most affected by the climate change, but also the continent where most of people don't believe that the climate change exists, because they are seeing on TV ice melting in Europe, in other continents. So since they don't have ice in their continent, they think climate change doesn't exist. That is one. And secondly, we are in a continent which is rich in resources like oil, And we know that oil is one of the causes of the climate change. We need to phase out. Then politicians or people who need to continue exploiting oil are using false information to convince local communities to accept them to do what they need to do. So when I'm trying to check the social media area of my communities, I can constate that they are not involved in the climate issues. No, but when you enter in their life, you will see that they are victim of the climate change. For example, myself, during my childhood, I have been a victim of flood every year during the rainy season. But it's only after the age of 20 that I hear for the first time the existence of the climate change. So that is one of the reasons why social media is very, very important for us in Africa to vehicle information about the climate change. And that's why myself and my team, we engage on social media. On Facebook especially, we are using French, but other social medias we are talking in English. And slowly by slowly, we are seeing that communities are starting to understand what is happening, and they can say no to the project that is coming to destroy their lands or their environment, and say yes to the project that is coming to construct. Yeah.
Thank you. So I actually love the work that you're doing, Dr. Anurag, because I think the biggest challenge to combating climate change in this century is going to be misinformation. We already have plenty of research proving that climate change is real. I was on a panel a few days ago, 5 people, and I was the only one with no PhD. So I think there's already an oversupply of data that proves that climate change is real. However, an under demand in seeking out this data, and an oversupply and an over demand of misinformation. And that's how you end up getting presidents elected who do not believe in climate change. That's how you get companies that give them the way to pollute our environment. And I think that's also how people end up being complacent about a very, very real threat to them. I think if everyone in the world understood how threatening climate change is to their livelihood, to their health, and to the economy of their countries, everyone would be up in arms. But people don't understand it. Technology is going to be super important in doing that because, as you said, Dr. Anurag, people are moving from consuming media from traditional media, so consuming information from there. They're stopping that, and they're consuming it mostly from social media. Now, it's great that everyone can post, everyone can contribute. However, it doesn't give for much filtering of information and understanding what's real and what's not. AI is going to be super important. I'm not just throwing AI because everyone's talking about AI, but it's going to be super important in actually filtering information, fact-checking it. That's one. Two, I think there needs to be a change at the policy level. So I work as a tech consultant with governments in the GCC. I think there's going to be a super important change at the policy level where if you post about certain topics, you're going to need to cite resources, just like, when a researcher publishes research. You're going to need to cite resources. You're going to need to have this fact-checked before it goes out to the world. I think that should be the bare minimum because, again, thankfully, a lot of people now have democratized access to talk and have an audience of over 1 million people if they want. But again, that information that they're giving out needs to be fact-checked using technology. Thank you.
So we have talked a lot about the problem. So what's the solution into it?
So there's actually a lot of practical applications, that we can have and that we can implement. The first one is, and they have already touched base on that, fact-checking tools. Right now, fortunately, there are a lot of different groups, associations that are working on this, practical tools for people to actually engage in these conversations and realize what is, misinformation, disinformation, and how to spot it. I think it's getting more sophisticated, misinformation, disinformation. So also how to spot it needs to advance as well, but also make it very applicable for people and very practical to engage on it. On the second one is to start the conversation, and I think that's why forums like these are very important. So we start speaking about it, because a lot of the times we don't even realize, that some of our friends and family might be sharing that. So until you have that hard conversation with people of like, stop sending that, it's when you actually encourage them to learn more about where that information comes from. The third one is a responsible social media use, which I think we have already touched base on that. We do have a responsibility of the information we consume, but most importantly, of the information we share with others. So we need to be very conscious about the impact that this is going to have, and the repercussions it might have, especially for political leaders, for people who have, this extensive networks. We have seen how much power one statement and, one intervention can even like create problems in other countries. So we need to encourage that, and I love what they mentioned about in the political and in the policy level, because we also need to make people accountable of the information they are sharing. It's not about just clicking a button, it's about the repercussions this information is having. The third one, support fact-checking organizations and be involved in courses and other workshops that can help in that, and try to include it in the formal and non-formal education as much as possible. Right now, the NGIP, they're doing a great job on generating courses to put this into a more practical level. So I think it's very important that we start engaging youth on taking these courses and understanding it and see how it is also applicable for their day-to-day life. And finally, community engagement is very important. Local newspapers, online platforms, and even school newsletters are great ways for you to publish articles and to start engaging on these conversations on the local context. We need to bring this down from these global forums to a more applicable and more local perspective, so they can also understand what kind of tools can help them to develop or to adapt to fit better.
I like what you said, adapting things to the local context. That is actually something that's helping me to convince my communities to accept what I've been telling them about the climate change. When I started, I have been victim of some attacks from some of my family members. There was like, you are advocating for something that is making the global north rich. They are giving you money. That's why you are shouting and making noise, something like that. We need to continue using our oil to become rich, something like that. And when I've been posting on social media, I've been receiving some attacks there. But once I started to look out around me, which kind of effects are related to the climate change impact, and explaining people that this is the climate change effect, they're starting to understand what I've been writing on my social media, and they are now supporting me in what I'm doing. Yeah.
No, I think I've kind of touched upon the point again of the importance of technology in combating misinformation. I think that's definitely important on the African continent as a fellow African as well. There is kind of a tendency to view this as a white people's problem. Sorry to use that word, but that's kind of how it's referred to. And I'm like, no, this is going to affect us more than anyone else. And we need to build up our resilience. And actually, the reason why I got passionate about this space when I was much younger is that when I was 8 years old, someone snuck me into a conference just like this, and I saw a 3D model of the world, and it was like in 2050, if we don't take any action against climate change. And my city was underwater, like my hometown was underwater, which is a very possible reality. So definitely, I think providing the right information and knowing that this is taking ownership of this problem is going to be very important in our part of the world as well.
As you talked about the information part, so with your technology background, what are the tips and strategies for a general public to analyze such information? If you can share something.
Sure. So I think the biggest challenge of this decade is going to be AI generated information. So that could be in the form of videos and photos. It's going to be increasingly hard to decipher what's right or wrong. Previously, if someone wrote something, it'd be like, that's an opinion. But if you see a video of someone doing something, you believe it's real. So I think we should all take things with a grain of salt. But as much as I think the public is responsible, I think governments are a lot more responsible. And I think government should be kind of monitoring the supply of this information instead. Because you can't really rely on everyone to make informed decisions without helping them understand what's good information and what's not. So I think there should be a mandate globally that if something has not been fact checked, there should be a tag on saying this has not been fact checked. If a company like Instagram or a company like Facebook, etc., so Meta in general and other companies should have tools to analyze videos to tell if they're AI generated or not. They will be a lot better than me or you or anyone to decide that. So I think we should really control this at the supply level instead of who's consuming this information.
Okay, thank you for those strategies. So if with that as a background, can you elaborate on the steps from the perspective of media literacy? Because these days, the people are not just the consumer of information, but they are also the creator of information. So what steps should be taken in this case?
Thank you so much. And I think especially for climate media, it's definitely challenging because it requires a lot of different aspects. The first one is obviously having the climate knowledge and background of the terms you use and the implications that each term have. Second one, the media, background or knowledge to know what are the best ways to present information as well, how to avoid bias. So I think it comes down to how do you match this combination, and also how do you support each other? At the end of the day, each topic is complex on its own. So I think it's a lot about also collaboration. How do you make information at the same time informative but attractive and reliable, which I think it's very complex on its own. One of the things I face the most, especially as youth, is how do I make information attractive? Because I know a lot of the times, reading a climate technical paper is not the most attractive thing to do. And I think that has been one of the main challenges we are facing right now on the climate space. And at the same time, that has led to a lot of misinformation because the topics are so complex to explain that it's very easy to generate bad ideas about it, which was one of the points my colleague was mentioning. For oil consumption, it's so hard right now to get also involved in the climate space. So I think it's very important to collaborate on this aspect and see how we can also make media information and literacy more accessible and also more attractive to people to engage, to see how we can have a ripple effect. And I do agree with the point mentioned. We also need to take this to the suppliers, to these companies, because they do have a huge responsibility of ensuring we're not encouraging this type of processes anymore. Because we've seen, accounts and a lot of people sharing misinformation, and at one point it seems like even the environment encouraged that. The more misinformation you share, the more viewers, the more followers you're gonna have. And we need to change that from the backup, not only from the consumption, because right now it's getting as well harder. So I think it comes down to that, engaging, supporting, and find how we can collaborate between the different aspects, and how we can also encourage our communities to be better informed and to bring these tools back to our communities and see how we can apply them and encourage people to take the trainings, but also to engage in a more responsible way.
Okay. Yes. I think you mentioned the part where how we can make it more attractive. And in school, from what I remember, I finished it not so long ago. We were learning about how to advertise in terms of how do companies advertise, and we had to do it ourselves as a project. So maybe we could use the same ideology that companies use to false advertise, promote disinformation, but we can use that thing to twist it around and give the correct information and make it attractive or alas desirable, as how I learned it. You get that like iconic visuals that attract your eye, like aesthetic designs that you can use, and things that attract Gen Zs and like Gen Z lingo, trends, etc. Trends, you really do a good job by promoting information. And you can always have, I'm sure there's a code or a hashtag that you can put right at the bottom that validates what you're saying. Attach a link, attach a QR code, attach something to say that, this is real, this is official, tag a blue tick account that has the same proper information. Something else you mentioned, and I think I smirked a little bit, something about how companies manage to do this successfully as well. I think that's why I thought about this. Yeah, so that's what I wanted to add. Yeah, anything else?
So if that's what we need, can you talk about the initiative which you were already part of, the course which you have built?
Yes, so along to the MGIP, the UNESCO Youth Climate Action Network, among other stakeholders, we contributed to this amazing cause, navigating disinformation and misinformation on the climate crisis. And the main point we're focusing is actually to tackling everything that I've mentioned, and first bringing the climate literacy, which is very, very important, and then bring in the media literacy so we can combine both, and especially bring in these tools and this more approachable information on how to spot misinformation and disinformation, and also ways to engage. So how we have done it is how we have divided it into strategic models with information, but also with strategies as well as activities for youth to engage on this aspect. And as mentioned, trying to make it very attractive with dynamic activities. With our aim is to foster that next generation on being involved on this aspect, and start the conversation. Starting that hard conversation of how can we make this better, how we can make media information more reliable, more trustful. I think there's a very huge trust issue right now, but we need to start with that important foundation in order to make it happen. So we encourage everyone to take that course on the MGIP website, and it's going to enable you to go all these different models and aspects. So at the end, you can earn a certificate, and it's going to prepare you to being able to spot all these different aspects that we have already touched base today.
So, Karanji, about your initiative around the environment education aspects, can you talk about it?
Yes, but I need to start by where I started with my own activism. It was difficult for me to connect or to appear in the international climate spaces. First of all, because I'm in the country where they speak French, and climate space is speaking English. So what I did, it was first using application to translate my messages before to post them on social media. And secondly, I was in obligation to teach myself English. That's helping me to be able to learn what is happening in the world. Then secondly, I'm coming back to my communities every year. Maybe after 3 months, I'm at school or university to teach them about climate change issues, how they can become part of the solutions. And what I'm doing also to increase the climate activity circle around me. When people are trying to join me, I'm telling them you have a voice that is useful for people around the world, in the country even. Then I'm asking them, you create a social media account, use X, Instagram, Facebook. When they create, I teach them about how to post, what they can post. I even teach them how to create graphics on Canva. And that is helping us to combat misinformation in the country. Because in Africa, most of our authorities, since they are not informed about the climate change issues, they are accepting any kind of investment which is coming in the way of destroying our biodiversities. For example, in the Congo rainforest, which is the second biggest forest in the world, which is rich in biodiversity and so on. Actually, they are planning to to start mining 9 new oil blocks in that forest. So they are using some political speeches to convince local communities to accept them. So what we are doing is to see, we are using social medias, physical meetings to see how they can say this project is coming to destroy our lands. We don't accept it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think again, like, love the work that you guys are doing, and would love to see more of it because again, as I said, misinformation is going to be the biggest challenge in this fight against climate change. But I think we need to hold. Again, I'm going to keep hammering this point down. We need to hold our governments accountable. So, for example, where I live in Dubai, and I don't think Dubai is perfect. However, there is a law against spreading misinformation, and I think that will make anyone think twice before spreading misinformation. You know, if you know that there's a legal liability to doing this, and this law, by the way, applies both to like general topics, so like climate change, and also spreading misinformation about people, which we saw happen a lot in the US this past year. So I'd love to see that change at the government level. I think that would be the quickest way to create like, a big effect.
So if there is one takeaway which you think the audience should take, I would like each one of you to just share one takeaway from this time. Who will go first?
Well, one takeaway, I'm glad to be at least the one female that's here and talking about this amongst like fellow Africans as well, and also groups from Asia. Key takeaways, I'm so glad that we are on the solution side, all of us on the solution side of the solution side. We are working towards a greater future, and my takeaway is that let's keep doing this, let's keep promoting this, and getting as many youth involved and getting them help with the misinformation, climate change anxiety, and also with education rights. Thank you so much. Also, can I please also share my appreciation for Dr. Anurag as well for including me in this. Great work. Second time I'm up here talking about climate change anxiety. So yeah, thank you.
On my side, I can say that social media is very important to connect the world, to connect the countries. It's important why? Because we are seeing a country like this one hosting us here. They are using oil to develop, but their temperature is good. The consequence of their activities, we are seeing them in the other side of the world, in Africa. So if they don't read something on social media about what is happening in Africa, most of young people in countries like this one won't accept that climate change is existing and people are dying because of that. So let's keep sharing our climate information on social media. If we are sharing true information, there will be a lot of true information and less of false information that will help people to understand what is happening exactly, and people will take action. Thank you.
So what is the takeaway?
Sorry?
What is the takeaway?
The takeaway is each of us have something to do to combat climate change. We can start where we are with what we have. Even your voice only is okay to do something to combat the climate change.
Thank you. And to add to that, I think my takeaway is that it's super. I love actually seeing this collaboration between the two of you. I think I would love to see more collaboration come out of COP between youth and academics, and youth and organizations, big organizations. Because as someone I think Kalonji had said, there's a lot of research, but kind of, actually it was Antonio, there's a lot of research, but kind of the way you portray that research in a nice and captivating way is really important. And I think that's where youth could be of help, and we could have that intergenerational collaboration. So I'd love to see more of that.
Yeah, I think mine will be media information and literacy is super important. It needs to be part of the formal education. and we need to encourage people to engage on it, meanwhile the non-formal education with courses, with workshops, because this should be tools that everyone should know, especially on the times we're living where we are bombarded with information every single day. We need to have these skills as part of our basic toolkit so we are able to, also help not spreading all the misinformation and disinformation, and actually encouraging the media and the news outlets to provide reliable information as well. I think the fact that we can have this as a basic, of education will be very important, so we can also move ahead and have a more informed generation.
Anything from the audience side? Any comments? Anything? Any question? You can ask question. There are panelists here. Yes, let's go ahead. Just question or comment.
It's a fun place to stand up and say, here's the audience.
That's fine.
I really like your point about how people should be required to fact check certain information. But I also wanted to get your thoughts on something. So I'm a machine learning engineer, and it's my field that's responsible for algorithms that stimulate people and sort of spread misinformation. People have started to care less about how truthful information is and more about how stimulating it is. As you mentioned, things are becoming too attractive. People don't care as much about if it's true, but rather if it's stimulating. And I wanted to know, do you think it would be a viable solution if governments begin to take legal action to social media companies who use these sorts of overstimulating content recommendation systems? Do you think that would be a viable solution?
Thank you, and I love that question, by the way, and I love that you're studying this so that you can, we're on the same page. How old are you, if you don't mind me asking? You're 16. Well, I love that you're here, first of all. So, fast food, okay, we're gonna get away from climate for a bit. Fast food in the 80s and the 90s was it, right? It was just a competition between different chains on who can put more sugar and fat in their food to make it more addictive, make it more viral, to use today's language. But at some point, we did a lot of research and realized fast food was really bad for us. Government started putting regulation in place, and now fast food is kind of looked down upon, and healthier alternatives are more profitable, better for us, more widespread. So I definitely think government can make a big intervention, and you can still have viable social media businesses that people use without having this level of misinformation that we have today. And especially, I think my biggest problem is the polarization that has created. And as Antonio said, you end up having echo chambers between, oh, I believe this, so I'm going to consume information on that. Thank you.
Anyone else would like to ask any question, comment, anything? Yes?
David Uganda is my name. I'm from Uganda. I coordinate the network of climate journalists of the Greater Horn of Africa. It is great to see that such conversations have come at COP. Yesterday, I was at high-level event, at a side event whereby we were talking of early warning systems, and I also presented in Pillar 3, dissemination and communication. So as we bring on youth and I see climate misinformation, we have to make sure that at least we need to involve everyone to see that robust infrastructure are made within our community. Remember, the Secretary General's call is to say that by 2027, every sector has early warning systems and they can get information at any hazard, disaster, or climate shock which is going to happen. But we see that in countries where we come from, like Uganda, 85%, you see that Kenya, actually the whole of Africa, 60% are youth. And also other countries like in India and also Asian continent, over the high percentage are youth, but the ones who reach on the ground. So we need to see that in case these policies or projects coming like early warning for all, youth are trained to know exactly what to do so that to avoid miscommunication and also relay this information to everyone so that no one loses their life and property. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments and suggestions. And I think we have come to the end of the session. And thank you, all of you, all the panelists for joining the session and also the audience. So a big round of applause for you. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.